2023. Chief, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Tonight's roll call. Calhoun.
Here.
Barnwell.
Here.
Wells.
Here.
DeMoss.
Here.
Finch.
Here.
Osenga.
Here.
Mayor McClure.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Now we're to citizen comments on any subject except items scheduled for public hearing. We have no public hearing. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Has anyone signed in, Madam Clerk?
No, ma'am. No one.
Is there anyone out there wishing to speak at this point? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda. I need a motion and a second, please.
I'll move for the approval of tonight's agenda and consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, we're ready to vote.
Voting on tonight's agenda and consent agenda. Osenga.
Yes.
Calhoun.
Yes.
Wells.
Yes.
Barnwell.
Yes.
DeMoss.
Yes.
Finch.
Yes.
Mayor McClure.
Yes.
Thank you. Your agenda and consent agenda have been approved, and you have no consent agenda items.
Okay, thank you. The item that we have on in new business for this special meeting is a discussion of the Seward City Code, Chapter 5.22, Developer Incentive and Reimbursement Program. And I'll turn it over to administration to enlighten us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This topic has come up at the request, I believe that you requested and possibly Councilmember Calhoun requested. But anyway, I'm bringing forward to have discussion regarding the program. And I understand that there's some nuances that we need to discuss or interpretations that are going on regarding the program. That I just thought it would be really good to discuss it and talk about where we are with funding the program and where you might want to go with the program and go that route. The first document that you have in your packet, Director Bickling put together for us. When an application comes in, it comes in to the clerk's office, then to me, and then it's assigned to community development. And Director Bickling works directly with the application and the developer, and then puts all the other documents to come forward to you for approval. So since he is very involved in, I thought we could go through some of what he wrote, but also I do believe there's questions that need answering. So however, Mayor, you want to go.
Okay.
Which direction you want to go. We're ready.
Okay, all right. Council okay with Director Bickling doing an overview? Okay, come on up. Tell us all about it.
I don't think that mic is on yet, so if you just slide it. Perfect.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, just as far as the process goes, obviously you guys have approved permits before. What generally happens is someone usually comes and talks to me first and they say, here's what I want to do, and then I refer them to the application and the clerk. And so what they have to do is they have to turn in the application that has the parcels to be affected, along with an estimate of the cost of improvements for water, sewer, electricity, engineering, surveying, kind of the work that goes into those items. So, and then in that, what they do is they can choose one of two options. One is they can choose, probably what most people do is the assessment district option. And that's where, as they start to incur costs, they'll bring us an invoice, and then we actually go and we basically pay everything up front. And then what we do is we get half of that back, since we're paying half the improvements. And so we do that through an assessment district. So an assessment district is formed. Then those lots are assessed for that value that we want to get back as a city. Although I say that with kind of a caveat in the fact that so far what has happened is that they usually pay us back, because as lots sell, then they go ahead and they pay us back before that, before those properties are ever assessed. So that's the first kind of route that most people take. The other route of what they can choose to do is they can pay everything up front, and they can bring us their receipts for the cost of improvements, and then what we do is reimburse them for half of it. So it's kind of two different ways of accomplishing the same thing. So in general, that's kind of what happens. So far we have had one that's been completed and done, and then we have 3 that are currently in process right now, somewhere along those phases.
Okay, Madam City Manager.
So something I wanted to point to, and it's also included in your packet, is the code language regarding the intent. It is the intent of this chapter to permit the city, when funds are available, to reimburse a developer for up to 50% of the cost of extending public utilities to the developer's undeveloped property in order to incentivize installation of public utilities and property development within city boundaries. So it is the intent for a developer to do it, not an individual landowner. You know, we've talked about that before, but it's for a developer to do that. Also note, it's for extending the public utilities. We're incentivizing for property development, but it is intended to extend the public utilities so that when a developer is developing, they may do their housing along the way, but the utilities go in before housing. So the utilities get placed in, and then just as Director Bickling stated, when they're selling the properties, that's when we're starting to get reimbursed and/or we'll do assessments. But it's important to note that the utilities are go in before the housing gets done. So just a little nuance to it I wanted to point out.
Okay.
And that's really all it. It's just obviously like the way that the intent, kind of going just some further deeper in the intent, is that on the city side, we get our infrastructure extended for kind of half the price, and we gain a whole lot new utility customers. We also then, once those are extended, we get, if people build houses, then we get the taxes and all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of a long game of investment that way. And our code also says too, it's the building code, and I think it's actually multiple places that they have to, like utilities have to be extended before they can build. And so they have to have utilities out there waiting before the building department will permit them to build the structure. So.
Okay. Councilmember Calhoun.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of questions that I have. The first one, I guess I'm going to start off. Do we have in place internal and external policies and procedures about this so that it is handled the same for each developer that comes in? Because it seemed, and you can correct me if I'm incorrect, but it seems that maybe the ones that we have going right now haven't necessarily been handled in the same way for each developer. And my question is there like an SOP when somebody walks in and says, this is what I want to do? I know they've got the application, but there are other things involved, like the subdivision agreement, which is basically what we will have to hold the developer's feet to the fire to develop those properties the way that they need to be. And if we don't have that, it just seems like we've had them for some and we haven't had them. And I'm just wondering if we have a set policy and procedure, checklist, whatever it is, that said this is what we're going to do before we move to the next stage. That's my first question.
I would say that I think we've handled everyone the same as much as we can, but it's when a property gets brought to us, like some of them are already like, they own it, they have it platted, they bring it to us in that kind of condition. They say, I want to develop these, it's already pre-platted, I want to do this with it, versus we've had ones where if they just bring us a piece of property and say, this is my plans, and they're just beginning in that process. And so some of those, like, I guess steps are a little bit different. We arrive at the same place, and we do obviously check off the list, like, yes, every person does have to have a subdivision agreement. We have to bring it before you guys for you guys to approve it. I mean, there's certain things in there, they don't necessarily always happen in the same order just because of the condition of how they bring that to us in the beginning. Does that answer your question to a certain degree?
If I can add to As far as operating, it's the code. So we don't have any other documents. There might be some internal process documents, but it's the code. And keep in mind, this code has been amended twice. So the first, actually, this is the second rendition of it. So when we were using the first round of the code language, we found pretty quickly it wasn't expansive enough, or nor it just didn't work for the application. So I think there are 2 under the new code that have been approved under the new code. What really is the change is just more steps like you spoke of. More requirements are in the new code than it was in the old code.
And can I add to that? I would say too, our subdivision agreement that we have now is way more robust and requires a lot more. Our subdivision agreements used to be pretty thin, and like the latest one is like right here, where it's, I mean, we require a lot of exactly what you're putting in the ground. Engineering plans, we want to be able to pass this on to our public works guys that say this is the product that's being used in the ground. So for future, when we take ownership of that and they guarantee it for a year, we have this. We also require very extensive like payment plans. And so we do, I would say, it has evolved. I would say it is getting better. But each person, I think, has been treated with the same like steps and process through to get them through so that they can get their development done. I would say, so there's not really a standard operating procedure per se, other than the code.
Councilmember Wells.
I think I can, I had a similar question earlier today, and you answered it for me with an example of phasing. And so, am I understanding it correctly, and please interrupt me right away if I'm wrong. So let's say we have 2 developers. You're both going to build 40-unit subdivisions, right? Developer 1 comes to you and says, you have 2 40-unit subdivisions. They both need 3 phases, one being the platting and the subdividing, the outlining of the utilities, right? So let's say that's phase 1. If I was to come to you with that already done, I would instantly go to phase 2, which is whatever the next step is. But if this developer hasn't got there yet and comes to you, right? You're like, okay, well now you got to go back and you got to do all this type of stuff. So am I understanding correctly that whatever developer gets to the point where they're prepared and ready for funding for utilities, and if this developer's not here yet, even though they're working on the same project, it doesn't mean that one developer got a benefit over the other, it just means one got there quicker? Is that what?
Well,
am I
the
right?
developer reimbursement program is a first come, first served, so whoever like comes us and just, they kind of gets lined up.
Okay.
But the part we were talking about earlier is that, that I probably didn't explain very well, is that when the developer is developing, like, let's say they have like this DRP and they've submitted it for this amount right here, for this project, for these lots, they can't start doing this development over here to try and assess that, put that into that DRP in a DRP area that they have not come and applied for yet.
Councilmember Wells.
Thank you. So when you say, so you're talking about 2 separate developments, correct?
Yeah, but I was talking about 2 separate developments by the same developer.
By the same developer, right?
Right.
Okay.
But yeah. So if they own, like, they come to us with a DRP for this, this set of lots, and the city council's approved that, they have to work in that and they have to finish that. But they can't begin working on this next one and start tying that into that one that has not come before council for those lots yet. That's the answer to the question.
Final.
Councilmember Wells.
So, I'm gonna make sure I word this correctly, because have we had a situation currently where a developer has not necessarily tried to do that, but wanted to do that, and you had to tell them no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to add too, we don't require phasing. So the developers that have come to us, they're one that's using a phased approach. That was their choice. We did not require it, and we don't. There's another developer we all know is not phased, they're going all out. So we don't, it is truly first come, first serve. We don't require phases.
Okay. Councilmember Finch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question under the definitions. I got actually 3 quick questions. Developer means a person who owns undeveloped land located within the city. Does that mean the people in Forest Acres that own undeveloped land would qualify for this? But it says, means a person who owns undeveloped land, not a contractor, but a person.
Who wants to?
I can't hear.
I'm not sure I understand. So a developer means a person who owns undeveloped land located in the city. So that, yes, it would be a person, or, I mean, physically, at the end of the day, it's going to be a person, whether that person owns a company or not. And so I'm not quite sure if that's, and then it goes down to undeveloped land, means it tracts or parcels of land that are not part of an existing improvement district. And then it goes on from there. But I'm not sure I understood.
Councilmember Finch, go ahead.
Because by that definition, Forest Acres, you can see, is a person, not a contractor or a business that owns undeveloped land. The other question I have is the first come, first serve. Is that anywhere in here written, or is that just what they've been adopted?
It says when available, so it is like if we have, it's kind of like a revolving loan is the way this works. And so when, like the first developer comes in, they use a chunk of money, the second one comes in, and then the third one may not come in if all the money is tied up. But what's going to happen then is that the first one in, they'll complete their stuff, and then when the city gets their money back, it goes back into kind of that, it's like that revolving loan, and that next person will be available to pick it up.
And final question is, in the application requirement under 522070, the application must be completed in full and the filing fee paid in full. If my memory serves me correct, when we had that here, there was signatures missing, and Councilmember Calhoun questioned them. Why wasn't that all completed?
I don't recall that.
Does anyone in administration?
I don't require, it sees, I'm just reading, sorry, I'm reading that code language. The clerk will submit a notice of filing to the applicant and to the city manager within 10 days. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember specifically.
Let me get Councilmember Wells.
Thank you. So, I'm not going to say I disagree with the administration's definition of a person, but I believe that a corporation or a legal entity is treated in the United States as an individual. So if you are a person and you form an entity, corporation, an LLC, an S Corp, C Corp, that entity is considered to be a legal individual. But it has to be an entity, right? So should we change that term person? Because let's be honest, everybody, my neighbor's a person, but they don't own an entity. And they're not a member of an entity, they're not a shareholder in an entity. And a developer, if they are an individual and they're operating as a sole proprietor, well, a sole proprietor is still an entity, not a person. So that was...
Madam City Manager.
Thank you. And, part of the reason too is that, thank you for that explanation, I agree with you. Remember at some point when this updated code, this version of the code was updated, we said it needed further refinements, so that's another further refinement that's needed. So, and that's part of what we want to hear tonight, whether other refinements need to happen. So, writing that one down.
Okay. Councilmember Calhoun?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I was just kind of going to touch on that because in our own definitions, it just tells it means a person who owns undeveloped land located in the city. That could be anybody that has a lot that's undeveloped, not just a developer, not just a contractor. Could be anyone, any person. So that's just the point of what our definition says in 5.22-.020. One of the other things that I was wondering is, one of the ways that we have been able to hold developers' feet to the fire, so to speak, on what they were doing with their developments was through the subdivision agreements. Do we have a subdivision agreement in place for every DRP that's out there right now? For all of them, we have
Yes.
fully signed. We know the streets are going to be 60 feet wide. There's going to be this many power poles. All that is all for every one of them?
Yep.
But we may want to think about the possibility of working that out before the council approves DRP money. Just because we've approved money, we're already making payments, and I think we're probably making payments before that subdivision agreements were finished. Is that right?
In some cases, yes. In some we held until that was signed.
This last one was held till it was signed.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Vice
Madam.
Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we were just talking before this last comment, we were talking about a person having a lot. Did we not have like a tracts? It says undeveloped lands means tracts or parcels, so are we talking plural? I mean, those, I'm assuming, are plural terms for lots. It's not like you own one lot. I mean, I thought that was the intent when we started this. It was not just one single lot owner. And that was going, I thought, to be defined in here. And is that what that part means? It means an area of, I'm sorry, means tracts or parcels of land that are not part. So that would be multiple lots, if that's what we were going for.
Madam City Manager.
That is the intent. I can see where that needs to be further expanded on, but yes, that really is the intent, and that's what the intent says up in the intent language. But I could see where this also needs to be expanded on to be further defined.
Councilmember Finch.
If we're going to amend this, I would like to see an amendment added in to have at least 2 bids for the cost of installation so that it'll maintain the integrity of the program to continue to function, because I've worked construction and I know what it would cost me to do stuff, so I would subcontract out somebody cheaper and it would save me money instead of what it would cost me to do, which in a sense would save the city money.
Okay, talk about that. Councilmember Wells.
Before I understand where Vice Mayor Osing is coming from, but let's, for example, one of the lots, well, I bought 2 lots in the city of Seward back in 2012, right? And I wanted to build a 4-plex. But the lot that was the size of 2 lots wasn't big enough, and obviously the single lot wasn't big enough. So I did a lot line adjustment and made it all one lot so that I could build a 4-plex, because you have to have it's going to be like over 9,000 some square feet in order to do that. Something like that, correct? So a person could, an entity, not a person, an entity could own one lot that's 144 acres, right? Because it's just one parcel, and then before they could go any further, they would have to do the lot line adjustments in the subdivision. That would be part of the process, correct? Director Binkley? Yes?
He's nodding his
Yes,
head.
I see him nodding his head.
Just
Yes.
for the public,
Yes.
yes, is
Yes.
the answer
Okay.
to that.
All right.
Can I make one?
Yes.
And just so you know that we have, I did want to make a comment to Commissioner Finch's, just comment that we do have our engineers look over each estimate to make sure it's reasonable. I do think, getting a competitive process might be, and then that's up to you, but we are doing that check to make sure that people aren't bringing us stuff that's overinflated.
Councilmember Finch.
I know with some of the construction that's going on, it's 160 linear foot, and other ones are going to be charging, that's a company that's installing it for other contractors, but the ones that are doing it themselves are going to be charging the city $200 a linear foot. So that's $40 a linear foot difference, and you run your 100 yards of that, that's a big price difference. So,
Okay. Councilmember Demas.
When there is money in the DRP again, is there going to be a waiting list if people want to submit applications when there isn't money, or how does that work?
Yeah, they can kind of get in line and just wait for that revolving fund, for those funds to get freed up and then kind of get pushed to the back of the line again. I mean, kind of that go back into the first come, first serve, so. And just to make clear, like, not all these monies that we're using are from the DRP fund, and so some will not be put in back into those funds. So we're using some ARPA funds because we're allowed to use those for like water sewer extensions, which is great because it's not our money. We're given that money and that's where the purpose was. And so some of those funds that are being paid for in the DRP will not come back because we can't ask for reimbursements for ARPA funding. But it is allowing us to do some of these bigger projects. But a lot of those DRP funds will go back and go back into that account.
Councilmember Barnwell.
So this is hypothetical, but let's say there comes a day when we are overly saturated and a developer has a chunk of land that says, hey, I want a DRP, but there's no incentive. We don't want to necessarily fund more if it's a saturated market, but they would benefit because they could develop their land and in the future it would be sellable. Is that true, or is it because of the incentive yet built into the state that would never happen?
I don't know if I'm understanding your question, but I do foresee, like, I think this is a very special program that is not in existence in very many places. So I think that this is like it's an amazing thing that we can do to help us get through this time. So and I imagine this is a limited time system. It's a very limited time system because I think if we lived in the middle of Nebraska, we could probably run this for, as long as you had land to continue to expand on, we keep going and going and going. But Seward we really are looking at this very intentionally, and we know these developments that are coming, and we are counting for money, and we're kind of like trying to say, okay, we know that this much money is going to be going on this one, and we have it there. And so, but looking at our land maps, we don't have a lot more land to develop. We can all name the parcels that can be developed like on our hand, and so we do feel like at some point in time this will go away.
Councilmember Barnwell.
The reason I ask that is that we might want to put time constraints on it at some point, not too far in the distance, because that would put pressure on those people that want to build. That this program might go away, therefore it puts a little pressure on them to push through on that, where instead of sitting there for another 10 or 20 years. It's just something I think we might want to consider.
Yeah.
Councilmember Fitch, I'll formulate my question.
So as they apply, you can just get whatever's there. What about if we were to have them do it in phases or yearly lot amounts? In other words, if they got 40 lots and they can say, hey, I can do 15 a year, lot them the money for 15 that year. When they get those 15 done and start to pay back, then we can, and that way it spreads the money out more equitable to everybody. Because the first come, first serve seems to have got some snags in it.
Well, I do think though, like when you're doing a project, it's actually done more cheaply. It's like if you can do it big and mass scale and order a lot of equipment together at the same time and lay everything in the ground and dig it all up at one time. And so I think there's also efficiencies in doing a massive scale that way. Just because you.
Let me get the city manager and then.
And it's also dependent on the project. So for instance, the most current project creates a loop. And so we want the loop because it's better for our system. So they are, creating this loop, so there's no way to have the standalone like that because they have to have the loop to connect back into the system. So otherwise it dead ends, and we don't want that through this process. There might be other properties that might work, but this isn't one of them.
Councilmember Fitch.
My concern on that is running the entire loop and then saying, okay, I'm only developing 12 this year, but I've tied up that money in the loop for the rest of my lots, where this contractor can't do anything because I tied it up.
Madam City Manager.
So creating the loop also allows others to come into the system. So say that, the loop, and I'm making up this loop like it's not really look like that. So I'm just saying right here, say that there's someone up here, they can actually connect into that loop. So it actually incentivizes more development with the creation of the loop, and it is better for our system.
Councilmember Wells.
And to Councilmember Finch's point there, it's also cheaper for the city, right? Because if we're gonna go in and develop one section, one project all at once, I mean, there's only so many employees in the community, right? And there's only so many employees that you can fly into the community to develop a project. So if I want to do a 50 home unit and I want to break it up into 15 units, right? Well, then I got to wait, so now I got to send those employees back to wherever it is that they're from, because we all know that they don't live here. And then when we go to have them do it, let's say 2 years down the road or a year down the road, the price went up, so it costs the city more. So if we just do it all at once, I hear exactly what you're saying though, that the developer could technically drag their feet, right? But if you've ever, which I'm sure you have, put your money into an investment, the last thing you're gonna do is drag your feet, especially over, say, $165,000 when you've got $10 million tied up. You're gonna get it done to get your investment money back. So, but I do hear what you're saying.
Councilmember Calhoun.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I believe, if I understand though, in our subdivision agreements, don't we have time frames that require those to be developed? And if they don't do it, then there are interest penalties and things tied to that, so there's even more of an incentive to get it done quicker, or those interest penalties can be pretty extreme. Is that correct? We still have that?
Yes, it's prime plus 4, so they're pretty.
Yes, Councilmember.
It's what?
Prime plus 4.
Yeah,
That's a pretty big incentive.
yeah, it's a... I did have a question. So the Coast Guard is going to be developing somewhere here, homes. Can they use this program because why? Madam
Well,
City Manager.
I'm sorry, I'm shaking my head and not interrupting you there. Part of it is, I'm going to be honest, part of it is it's a government program, and we're a government program, so they just don't mesh, and they have funding for their whole project, and it's really meant for developers, here. It isn't meant for their project, and theirs is going to be exclusive to them. Their development is exclusive to Coast Guard, so it really doesn't develop. In some ways it does. It'll move a Coast Guard person out of a private into that possibly, but overall it doesn't really match what the intention of the DRP program.
Someone had asked me that, so pass that question along. Councilmember Wells.
Okay. You were talking about the different processes, and I forgot the two terms that you used. One is where the city pays everything up front, and then the developer, the city pays everything up front. So let's say it's $500,000, we pay for that. And when does the developer start reimbursing us their 50%?
They kind of have they have options on how they want to do that, as long as
Okay.
they get it back to us within a certain time frame. I think the most recent development is like the minute they start selling lots, they're going to start paying money back, because that's in the best interest of them to move that stuff on and get that money back into the city. And so as long as they get it back, they have 6 months from when the utilities are completed. Just when that project, the DRP project is completed, if they do not have all that money paid back within 6 months, that's when that prime plus 4 kicks in. So when their utility installation is completed, then that's when that 6 month starts.
Can I ask a follow-up? Thank you. So then it's even an additional advantage for the DRP program, because if the city's going to put the money up front, now the developer has more cash flow to complete the project, correct? So it actually could help them move that timeline along quicker, whereas if they have to pay as they go, that interferes with their cash flow, which then can slow the project down. So won't every developer use the city's money first because it's cheap money?
Yes, and then we have tonight's agenda, we do have one that's moving over to that. They applied a while back, and they are moving, their request was to move from one to the other.
Councilmember Glass.
Moving to where we pay up front?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Finch.
Is there any way to keep money in there so where investors and developers will keep using this program instead of investors getting together, want to develop and find out there's no money and they back out?
We don't have, I mean, it's kind of a first come, first served rotating loan. I mean, it'll come back, you just have to be patient, wait for it, you know.
Councilmember Finch, did you have a follow-up?
And that's concerning me because that backflows a lot of other development. Is there a way we can keep money in there, if anything, limit the amount that goes out with each one so that we have more for others to keep that ball rolling instead of it just hit the bottom of the cliff?
And the city manager.
I have an idea for funding, because I've been thinking about this, and right now there isn't any funding available, which it will happen during this program, and to your point, it's eventually going to run out and it'll sunset. And I like the optimistic thinking of being oversaturated, love that. But so remember a couple of years ago when the council approved a loan from the motor pool for the animal shelter project. The intention was, and I believe that was 900 and something, I'd have to look that up, but 900 something thousand. The intention was the sale to Chugach would go to repay the motor pool back. Chugach 635,000-ish, right in there. We've received the funds for Chugach. It is sitting in our capital acquisition fund. That money is there. You actually appropriate it to go there, and it's just, I don't want to say just sitting there, but it is sitting there. And then we still have the loan to the motor pool. My thought is there is enough funding in motor pool at this time, not to replace everything. Say today everything went down, there's not enough for that, but the reality of that happening hopefully is very low. But there's enough funding right now in motor pool that should you choose to, you could forgive that loan and you could move. I wouldn't recommend moving all of Chugach, but maybe 300,000 to DRP if you wanted to keep the fund going.
Councilmember Glass.
So, again, Councilmember Finch, I hear exactly what you're saying, but we also have to keep in mind that we won't always be able to have money for every developer to participate at the exact same time. That's just the fair market. Not every developer has the funds at the exact same time to start a project. So does that mean we have to hold money back and wait for this one developer to finally get the cash flow and the timeline together and then we don't have an obligation to every developer in the community. We are offering a service that is not offered hardly anywhere. And for one developer to be upset because they weren't because of the first come, first serve, or because there's not enough money for them, there was no money there 3 years ago either. There was no money there 20 years ago. It's something that is a benefit, and I like the first come, first serve, because it means you've got to have your ducks in a row. You got to be ready to move forward, and if you're not, you're not. And if you got to wait 6 months, well, you got to wait.
Councilmember Finch.
And I can understand the first come, first serve, but like it says right here, the application process has to be completed. And I distinctly recall seeing those signatures and Councilmember Calhoun questioning where were the signatures at. And how did we let that go with completed in full?
Can I just speak to this, because the application starts with the city clerk. So I just want to say that when I receive an application, the requirements for the application, what comes along with it, is included in the code here, 522. It says 0680, so that's I'm not sure, it's probably supposed to be 080. All of those items are, like, I check for them, but then what I do is I contact the city attorney and have them review the application and the contents as well that were submitted. So until I get verification, because I'm not a planner, so, until I get verification from the attorney, I don't consider it final. that the application is complete. But when I do, then I can do the letter to the applicant, and then I forward the file to the city manager to start processing. So it just, if it helps, there is a review process for application materials that come along. Does that help at all?
Councilmember Finch?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I just distinctly remember when that comment was made, I looked and the signature was missing on my copy. Now I want to go home and dig that back up and look at it and see.
Councilmember Wells?
All right, so, can anyone pull up this document that Councilmember Finch is speaking of so that we can nip that? Or not, or deal with it now? Because that's what we're talking about, and I want to make sure we're, so if I understand, I guess my point is, I don't have a question, I do have. To the city clerk, would you say that every application that's been brought forward to us was deemed complete by the city attorney? Is that what you're saying?
Eventually, yes. I'm happy to go get I can go print off. I don't know which application it is being referred to, because there were 2 for the Gateway, 2 different, and then 1 for the Hilltop. So I'm not sure which one it is that is being.
Councilmember Calhoun?
Not really meaning to stir it up like that, but it was the Hilltop development, and the application that was dated and everything did not have all of the department head, none of the department head signatures were on it. I don't know whether the department head signatures are required to make it a complete application or not. Maybe they're not, but it had none of those signatures on it. And that was why I brought it to question at that point. I think we're probably kind of way beyond that at this point. But the concern is just, that's why I was asking about the procedures and the policies, that those were all in place, and so that everything's done the same.
Okay, that's actually helpful, because that comes later in the process. The department head sign off is down the road. That's not part of determining an application is complete.
So maybe just a misunderstanding at that point, but in any event, we're moving forward here, so, okay.
I just pulled the documents from the packet, and it's dated, received by the clerk's office on October 3rd. It was signed by Joe Tugas on September 29th in the packet, and then it goes on from there. And the clerk is right, the department heads are not on this portion of the things. It's later in the sign off on the building parts and the subdivision agreements, all those other times. But in the packet that was in, the packet that was in the document that was in the packet, it does appear to be signed.
Okay. What else you got? Councilmember Barnwell?
The only thing I fear in this program is that it does benefit people with bigger, deeper pockets. And I don't know what we can do to make it more equitable. I think that's part of what we're talking about here. I'm not sure how we could tweak it, but it is something I'd worry about.
Yeah, well, it is a developer program, and, not an individual. And, so it's a whole different process, or different intent, I think, than, just 1 or 2 people trying to build a house or get utilities to it. But there's got to be a way to help that too, which we're working up to. Councilmember Wells.
I would ask Director Binkley, what is considered a developer in this program? So if, for example, if I have 10 lots, am I a developer? Or if I have 4, if I'm going to build 10, how many homes is considered a development, I guess is my question. And I apologize if it's right there, I haven't seen it.
That's a good question. Anybody want to answer that?
I can tell you practically the smallest we've done is 6.
Okay.
And then that's been one where they took 3 lots and they divided them into 6 and they're doing utilities for like 6 houses. And obviously the biggest one then we have here is 87. It's the largest.
Councilmember Wilson?
So, to Councilmember Barnwell, anybody who's gonna build more than one home at one time is gonna have some type of depth to their pocket, right? But we've done them as few as 6, so you don't have to have enough to build 100 units, but you gotta be able to build more than 2 units or 3 units. So I guess to administration, or to Director Brinkley, should we put it in there, how many units is considered a development in order to qualify for this program?
Councilmember Tomas?
I absolutely think that we should have some sort of limitation or number, not limit, but a number on what, and an explanation on what is a developer, because there's a lot of people that just own homes. I mean, I could have my entity, I could have my corporation own my home. I live in town and I don't have public sewer, so I could use the DRP just for myself, which I guess, are we okay with people like that doing it? I would be okay with that, so people could have the opportunity to afford it, and we're also extending utilities still. That means that my neighbor's gonna get it that much cheaper, or there's a lot of people that are in Forest Acres that don't have the extension. And if we don't wanna go that route, that's fine, but we need some sort of language on it.
Vice Mayor Singh?
The only thing I would say to that is the development would be something that would benefit the community as far as enlarging the number of lots and homes available for sale for people to move in. Someone who's just getting one to their own house, they're not necessarily adding anything to the community. They're bettering their own property, so I think that's a difference in the development. I would say in terminology of a development.
Also, it is designed for undeveloped property, not just, getting utilities to your house kind of thing. So, Councilmember Tomas?
To what Councilmember Tomas was saying is, even if my entity had 1 lot, and I want to subdivide it and build 2 units, my entity would qualify. So I think that we should talk about, as a council, what the minimum is, because we don't have that. And so when we decide what the minimum is, then we can also address, I believe, the person or entity definition as well.
Councilmember Tomas?
Well, I mean, I think I would, at this point, go back to supporting even just one person as a resident, and you don't have to be a developer, because I feel if you live in the city, you should be able to connect to utilities without it making you go broke. Some people just can't even connect to utilities. So I think that the city should chip in, and this could apply to, well, just a resident as well. That's my think.
Madam City Manager?
I was just thinking maybe that could be a separate fund though. Make it, because that is very different from this, because it does speak to undeveloped land. So it's very different, so perhaps a different program, different fund. And I'm not saying there's funding for it right now, but a different program.
Councilmember Tomas?
And just to clarify there, I guess I'm talking about undeveloped land as well. Someone can own a lot in town, they want to build a house, but they don't have any sewer, that far away from sewer. So yeah, it could easily be a lot, undeveloped land.
Madam City Manager?
So that could be through the special assessment, but perhaps then there could be, and again, we don't have the funding, but perhaps there could be city funding, designated funding attached to, currently in code it says that the residents pay 100%. Maybe at some point, if the city had funding, the city could pay a portion of it. We just don't have it right now, which is what we just went through with the land in Opognac. But, at some point, set up a fund specifically for that.
That was what I was just going to suggest. That might be a way of getting those people some assistance. So we're trying to find areas for that. Let me get Councilmember Wells.
Well, no, he was first.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
I was just going to say, I think it kind of depends on where this person's located also, because I did at one time own a piece of property, and the houses that were beyond it were connected, and there was a fee to my lot that was because the person that had installed the utilities that went by the property I owned, there was already an assessment on it. So I mean, then you have to worry about, we're not gonna pay half of an assessment that's already existed from before, right? So it just depends on where, I mean, there's a lot of things that can go into developing a single lot. Just have to be really careful about how we look at that, because there could be fees that are on top of fees that we're already trying to collect.
Councilmember Wells.
This would be a question for Madam City Clerk. As a council member right now, is it appropriate for me to make a motion and suggest a minimum number of lots, or is that not appropriate at this time?
Well, this is a discussion item, so you're welcome to do a motion to direct, something will have to come back to actually put the action in place, but you can make the suggestion, you can do it by unanimous consent, or you can do a motion.
Councilmember Wells.
Then I'd like to make a suggestion for discussion. A minimum of 3 lots is the basis for a development program, and you could buy one big lot and subdivide it. Now you've got 3 lots, right? And if an individual entity, and at that point, if an individual person, if they're not doing their taxes correctly and they want to be a sole proprietorship, so let them be it, they would still qualify because they would be developing 3 lots. If 3 different families came together and said they want to develop these 3 lots, they come together as a group, they now qualify as a development program, and now, we're moving those along. I know that the goal for the DRP is for big development, but speaking to Councilmember Barnwell, not everybody has the money to do big development, but 3 additional homes in our community is 3 additional homes in our community, and if it's 3 families that pull together to put those 3 homes together, how is that a bad thing? So,
Councilmember Demas.
Do the lots have to be connecting?
That was good. Councilmember Wells.
well, I think that it would be in the best interest of the city, obviously. We don't want to, if the lots are not connected and we're bypassing somebody else's 5 lots, well, we're still running now utilities right there that those other lots can then turn around and tap right into without paying for the original investment.
Councilmember Demas.
Do they have to connect on all sides, or can they just connect on a corner? Say there's 4 lots, and can they just be these 2 lots? And then another one right there, just connect on the corners?
I guess that,
Councilmember Demas.
I think that is something that we should definitely discuss and ask administration to put together a detailed plan, because I have heard from other people, it's just not clear enough, and so I'm really glad that we're working on it. I think it's an amazing program, and I'm in such huge support of it. But we definitely want it to be fair and, again, fit more pocketbooks, because that's just more development.
I agree with that, but I would like to see, let's say if you have lot 1 to 10 and lot 1, 4, and 6, have the money to run it, but anyone in between, they still have to pay their difference to tie into it. Because that would create more incentive the longer, lots 1, 5, and 10 were the 3. They run the whole length, they still have to pay to tie in the difference, but there's a higher incentive for that.
Madam City Manager.
So currently, what would happen if your scenario 1, 4, and I think you said 6, but
6.
1, 4, and 6, they would be paying that half. And then 2, 3, and 5, their only connection would be $500 for the connection
Yeah.
fee.
Oh, okay.
So I see where you're going, and that, I'm going to be honest, is the benefit that some people will receive. Say, we're talking about the Hilltop Loop, just saying that. Those people are connecting in they see a benefit because they being Hilltop have done the work, and now these others can connect in for a lot less. And it can also benefit further out, so other developments can happen that there may be, again, a developer reimbursement program that comes off of the Hilltop loop to go further out, but Hilltop paid the bulk of it to get that far. So it all kind of builds on each other, this program does.
Did Councilmember DeMoss, you had your hand up?
I just have a quick question. Do all of the DRP applications come to council? Thank you.
Councilmember Calhoun.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just maybe, I don't know if we can do this as not necessarily a motion, but a direction or a unanimous consent to maybe have administration go ahead and put these definitions together for us on what's going to constitute a developer, what's going to constitute the land that can be developed under this program, and have them bring it back to us. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that all tonight, but have them come back to us with that, and we can take that up at another time and when it's a little more refined, and do that.
Is that something administration could do? Well,
It would come back as an ordinance, because it amends the code. So it would come back as an ordinance amending code, and then you could,
We could tweak
amend that language that comes to you, so, to refine it further.
Okay, Councilmember DeMoss.
I was going to ask if, so then are we directing administration to include something for minimum? Okay,
That's what I
so, and we're just going to let you come up with some ideas after some brainstorming? Okay.
That's what I understood.
Councilmember Finch.
And if we could have Emmett put in, have at least 2 estimates to maintain the integrity of the program, because some people have the equipment, like the guy out on Nautical, he ran the ditch and did his own power instead of having the electric guys come out and do it.
Is that a doable suggestion, administration? She's writing it down. Okay.
I mean, it's doable.
I'll get
Yeah.
yours.
It's doable. I think should be further discussed, I guess, and the part of it is because of the code in 522060B talks about B1, the design and construction costs. I don't know, it further defines it there, but it doesn't require 2, so that can be included.
Councilmember.
I understand the idea around the 2 bids. But if one contractor has the equipment and the ability to do it cheaper and another contractor doesn't, well, those 2 contractors are going to come back with 2 different bids. So isn't fair market value, like for the fair price, which is what I believe Director Brinkling is saying, is that you have the engineers look at it and the engineer says, this is a fair price. Whether another contractor can do it for less or not, this fair price is fair market value. So that's just all I have to say to that, I guess. But I do hear exactly what you're saying.
Madam Senator.
And I guess I would be a little concerned, I wouldn't want then council to say, you have to go with A or B, because that's not the city's role at all in this program. So that would be my only concern is, what is the point of it, because we don't choose, A or B. We don't choose the contractors, we don't do any of that. So that's my only concern.
Councilmember Finch.
Yeah, my main concern is maintaining the integrity of the program to where if Randy can do it for 150 and he can do it for 170, the city's going to recommend going with Randy.
Mr. Sullivan.
If I may, the one thing, I guess, to add to that is the developer's paying 50%. So they already have a built incentive to go, they themselves have an incentive to not go with an inflated, if they've got a bid for 200,000 and they've got a bid for 150,000, then they have a reason to do that. And I think I guess, to zoom out real quick too, because I've been here 3 years now, is I would say too, this to keep in context when we're talking about refining the program, this program has national attention. Like, we get calls from other municipalities in Alaska, the lower 48. This is something Seward's doing that's very innovative, and so it's cool to see us refining it, but I think to keep in context too, that this is an amazing program, and we should continue to refine it. But, yeah.
Councilmember Finch.
So my concern is, let's say if I want to put my infrastructure in and I'm going to charge you $180, but Randy can do it as a contractor for $150. I'm going to be making money, even though I got to put 50% in, I'm making money from the city, charging $180. When if the city says, pay Randy, I'm actually saving money and the city's saving money.
Let me get Councilmember Jamal, see what's something.
I mean, I feel like you guys aren't talking about this, so if you want to
just
talk
hold
about
on.
that, I'll
Okay.
talk about that.
Okay,
So I
Councilmember
just,
Wells. Yeah.
again, to what administration said to Councilmember Finches, the council cannot direct, I mean, that would be government telling a business what they have to do, and I believe that all of us are opposed to that. I read the same email that you read, and I did some research on it, and I think that it was a little infactual. And the simple fact is that, as Stephen said, is that no developer is going to go with an inflated rate unless they're getting a kickback. And if they're getting a kickback, then they are. But as to what Director Pinkling said, is that we know what the fair price is. So even if the rate is inflated, nobody's going to approve it if it's inflated over what the fair market price is. And just like if you wreck your vehicle, my final point is, if you wreck your vehicle, your insurance company can't tell you where to go to get it fixed. But if you want to keep the money in your pocket and not fix your vehicle, you're going to go get the most expensive bid and put the money in your pocket. That's just what you're going to do. But the government can't tell you what to do. And I don't believe we should be able to tell a developer where they can buy their product or what subcontractors they can use when we have our community development and the engineers looking at it going, whoa, this is the craziest price. $5 million for 10 feet of concrete, you know? So I believe, and my question would be to Director Brinkley, are you saying that our engineers look at this in detail? And if it was overly inflated, would you be notified? If it was $1.2 million inflated, would you notice?
That was a yes for this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. And
They can't see.
that's all I have on it today.
Related to this, or the discussion about the bids?
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say
Councilmember
that
Wells.
I want everyone to remember that it's going to come back to council, and so I think that as council, we're learning as well, and, you know, when you look back, you think, okay, maybe I should have questioned that more, or maybe we should have done that differently. And I think that the projects are going to be so different too, that maybe it's really important that we have our intent in this, and so we can go back on what the intent is when we're approving these, you know, projects, and just kind of learn from what we've already done. But I find comfort in knowing that it comes back to council for final approval.
So the current discussion is whether to put in that we need 2 bids. That was Councilmember Finch's
Yeah.
suggestion, and maybe we should get a kind of a consensus how we feel about that. It's not a motion, but it's a direction, so we could do a vote, or Councilmember Wells.
I thought I was going to be done, but I apologize. So I have no quorums whatsoever with requesting 2 bids when available, right? But we all know that those 2 bids may not be available, right? But I have no quorums with saying we want you to receive 2 bids. My issue is that I don't want council to have the power to decide who a contractor works with, what materials a contractor buys, that type of thing. So I have no quorums with requesting 2 bids when available.
So then the point of the 2 bids is,
So I believe
There's no
so.
decision based on it?
Well, I believe so that we, as a council, would be able to,
You could see
and the
that.
city could see whether one bid was
Okay,
ridiculously inflated or not.
okay, Vice Mayor.
So I would really hope that anybody who's into this, doing their best business, would look and get as many bids as they can get. And then they would decide on the best bid for them. And I don't think we need to tell them to do that. I'm sure that anybody with any business smarts would know to do that. So I really don't think that we need to require that as a suggestion in our process here.
I'm seeing nods in that effect, so, we should vote. Okay, this is, it's not really a motion, it's a discussion item.
Motion?
Yeah, okay, you can make it as a motion, Councilmember Finch. Just a simple motion.
Yeah, make a simple motion to have 2 bids for the city to be able to review.
Is there a second? Okay, there's no second. Okay, so that dies. Okay. But we have the suggestions that we've made, and opening up the new possibilities of a new discussion for individual incentives for smaller developments too, which might help out with this business that we're looking out in the audience here. And I'd like to bring that back at some point when, Councilmember Johnson.
Just kind of one last thought on that individual reimbursement is, I think that can be obviously a larger discussion, but I think that there's some other, I'm not sure we really need to go like the DRP route on that. I think that there's a lot of other.
Right.
Yeah.
That was what I was thinking, a different way, but we've got to start looking at that.
Right, yeah, for
That's
sure.
secondary to this.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order, Councilmember Finch?
I was just noticing in, thank you, Madam Mayor, under 522030 general, it's talked about private developer, but we don't have a definition on a private developer, just a developer.
Where do you see? Oh, I see what you mean, okay.
Yeah, it just caught my eye. It's like, we've got developer up here, but now we got the private developer down here. We could get the definition of that added in there.
Where do you see private developer?
522030 general, line 1, and on A, section A, and section B, it says extension.
Oh, I see.
May be completed by a private developer.
Yeah.
I can just copy it.
Interesting, so maybe we can fix that language. Good job, yeah. I couldn't even find it. No, that's why there's this many of us. Yeah, I see that. Anything else for the good of the order on this? I think this was a valuable discussion, and, hey, welcome. Okay, we ready to wrap this up? All right, I'll move down to now citizen comments. And if there are citizens that wish to comment, you can have 5 minutes. You just need to tell us, we know, but tell us your name and if you live inside or outside.
Jazz Odner, inside city limits. Just coming to hear this, I think if we're refining this fund, we should refine the fund kind of around our situation. If the city plans to help us with utilities for the Fognak subdivision, yeah, that's all I really want to say. But, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Same routine.
Eliza Woodworth, inside city limits. Can I ask a question? Or is it more a statement?
You could ask, and then in our comments we can answer.
Okay. I guess to speak to the individual or the person in the code language, would an HOA be considered like, would a grouping of individuals, could that be considered more than an individual? Like, would that be considered a development? Maybe that could be a way, as a suggestion, to get around the individual versus developer, because we're, as a group, like, we can say we want to be a neighborhood and we all want to, the goal is to build a bunch of homes all at once. Maybe that could be something to think about for how you could get around the individual versus developer.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and administration comments and responses to citizens' comments. And I'll start with administration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, thank you for this conversation. We knew the last time this was adopted that this needed further refinement, and I do think this is an ongoing further refinement as, you know, each scenario that we've come across and all of the DRPs that applications that come forward have been different. So every single one we're, you know, lining up with the code and, you know, figuring it out and then realizing, okay, we need to add more code language regarding this or that. And so it was a good discussion. I'm not sure that I have an answer for Eliza, so that's something I would want to, you know, end up talking with the attorney about and, you know, seeing about that. But, I mean, it's something definitely to look at, for sure.
Okay, Councilmember Barnwell.
Great discussion, really thoughtful. And it's pretty exciting to see that this DRP program is getting attention across the state or in the nation. I think it is really exciting to be part of this. So thanks for the admin for all the work.
Okay, I'm just going to come this way. Councilmember Wells.
I'll speak to the HOA idea. I think that is a good idea. I do believe that in our program, it says it has to be undeveloped land. So if any of those lots within that are already developed, then they wouldn't qualify for the development reimbursement program. But if those lots had no developments on them, and a group of people want to come together and form a private entity and a construction company, if you will, then those members would qualify, in my opinion, for the development reimbursement program. As long as they had the business and the insurance and everything that they had to do to be a legal contractor.
Councilmember Demas.
Yeah, thank you so much, administration, for all your work on the DRP. I got on council when we first initiated it, and it was very exciting and really cool to see it being utilized right away. So I know it's been a lot of work because we haven't had anyone to model it after, so it's just a lot of fine-tuning at this point, which I definitely think we do need more fine-tuning on the language. I'm not sure. I think that if we put some energy and thought into how we can help private residents on getting utilities, whether it's through a payback plan on their property taxes, or I've heard of a couple different ideas, even so they don't have to come up with $10,000, $20,000 right away just to get the utilities. A lot of people would be willing to pay it if, you know, there's some help. Just, I think that there's more that the city can be doing even without giving the money. Yeah, so I'm not sure we need to make it that complicated and think, you know, how can we put together groups of people? If we had the individual side of it sorted out, that would deal with that. And then if we fine tune the wording on the DRP, I think that it could just be two kind of really good programs. So again, I appreciate everybody's work, and I appreciate this meeting because I think that it was important that we got a lot of this out for the public as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Finch.
I like the idea of the HOA entity too. That's a very good idea. It's nice to hear that this program's getting national recognition and reviewing. I'd like to see more money being put in the DRP to add back to the community, to grow this community. I would love to see, Councilmember Barnwell says, you know, someday we just too many houses on the market. That's an amazing concept that I'd love to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Calhoun.
Not much, Madam Mayor, just I'll be interested to see what comes back to us from administration later, and how we can continue to improve this program so that it can continue to be taken advantage of and develop in the community. So.
Vice Mayor Alcina.
I just pretty much echo what everyone else has already said. I do really think this was a very constructive discussion we had tonight, very good meeting. Thank you, administration. Thank you for community development for their being here to explain a few things, and yeah, it was a very good discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, and I echo all that. This is a good program. When it began, we fumbled a bit, and we're still getting it right, but it is innovative. When things are new and innovative, people do have to fine-tune, and I'm eager to explore ways of expanding it out too, so. And thank you for all of the input. So with that, I will adjourn this special meeting at 6:40.